Okay, so here we are. Wait. Hello, hello. I see someone is here. How are you doing? Hope everything's good. Any questions? We have another person. Mr. Sedent, Mr. Kapoor, yes. How are you? It's good to see you here. Pretty good, pretty good. Just doing stuff. You've been waiting for this live stream? Oh yeah, because that comment, huh? Yeah, that's good. Good. Glad you reminded me. Pretty sure that's what you're referring to. Yeah. Let me pull that up. I don't remember what that was. Okay. So it's just so slow. All right. All right. So we were talking about with the flap D and trilled R. That was it. Yeah. I know I do, right? I have such a great memory. So you asked for context for people. This was from a comment on my video, my lesson about the 4 D sounds of American English. And Sedent asked if that means that, let's see, which also to clarify, so I'm imagining we're talking about the word water because that has a flap D. Yeah, go ahead and ask that question here. But maybe you're asking about like where or something. R plus D combinations, like order. Oh yeah, there's that one as well. Yeah. I think was that in the same thread? Yeah. Okay. So R's and D's and D's and R's and trills and all kinds of things. Okay. So for that, yeah. So the basics. So okay. So you say later, right? So it would also include water, later, water, things like that. That doesn't have an R before it. Or do you mean order and then later you want to talk about porter? Okay. Anyway, it doesn't matter. This is a good place to start either way. One of the things I mentioned in that video was that if you speak a language that has a trilled R, and I think there are a few different types of trilled R's. There's one in the back. I'm not sure if that has a different name, but what I'm referring to is like in Spanish, for example, they sort of tap the tongue along the top here and it just kind of waves. And that's like, which I don't have complete mastery over because I was lazy. After 6 months of trying to be able to do it, I got lazy with perfecting it. So in English, so in words like these, if your tongue goes back in the mouth, yes. Yes, so perfect. I'm going to come back to that once I describe the basics here, because this is important to get the whole picture. So when you in a language, if you speak a language that trills the R words like tap 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 tap, we want one version or one tap of that. It's not exactly the same sound, but for example, the Spanish single R, like in the word caro, is ra, ra, ra. It's just one single tap, caro. The flapped D, whether it's spelled with a T or a D, it doesn't matter in English. or in American English anyway. If it's supposed to be flapped, it's a flapped D sound. It's very, very similar sounding to that single tap trilled R. If in your language it seems strange, then you can ignore that. That's just a piece of advice that often helps people who speak languages that have a trilled R. Now, coming to words like order or porter or quarter, mortar, border, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have all these words. We have, first there's the combination of flap D plus the vowel. And this is a special combination that I didn't talk too much about in the main lesson. But we also saw an example of that in the T lesson with the word better, which is also a flapped D. Doesn't matter if there's two T's, two D's, it's just spelling. Going from that D to that okay, that's the first step. So before we even bring in the R sound before the D, you have to be able to tap and pull into the Now what happens with this is normally the tap D, it's going to be more or less around the D position, right, where it would normally be placed, and we just kind of flap it, and that's it. But when you have to pull into the right, the next sound can affect it. I think I might have mentioned a little bit about this, or maybe I deleted that. I don't remember if it made it into the video, but when you go to what we tend to do, instead of tapping up here, this is your teeth, top of your mouth, there's this part here that starts going up in the back. And instead of going here, we might actually sort of tap it here and pull back. And so it's not like the Indian D or whatever, where it sounds like g, because that's still like a solid D. This is still tapping, right? We just want to, and that could be very, very difficult for English learners, especially if you don't have a really solid R sound, okay, like an English R sound. So that's the first thing you have to get. If you can do that, then we have the extra difficulty of putting an R before it. So in a word like order, so in this case, we're doing an R-colored O, in or, right? That's the or part. And it's a stressed syllable, so 99% of the time, a OR in a stressed syllable is going to be or, R-colored O. And then you have to go into that flap D and pull into the So first you got to be able to do the or correct, right? Or whatever it is, whatever type of R sound is before it. So we say or, nice solid or. And then you have to sort of shoot your tongue forward and tap and pull. And this could be very, very difficult. Order. There's a trick though, because if you just follow the way, right, I tell you to do the R, okay, pull into the R. I tell you to do the tap D or the flap D, you flap it. I tell you to pull back into the R. Those pieces can work by themselves, but when you have this type of combination, we're actually going to make a change, because as you probably realize, if you try to go from here, shoot forward, and then pull back, it's really difficult to do, especially to keep that tap instead of doing a regular D. So order. Let me see, how do I do this? Order. Water. So what it feels like my tongue is doing is, the R is already there, right? So we have the O, the R-colored O. So that O immediately starts changing into an And so my tongue is, the middle of my tongue is kind of already, it's not fully pulled into an R, but it's starting to take that shape, and we start to hear that R sound. But then I let the tip of the tongue come and tap, and instead of trying to shoot it forward and then pull it back, or even tapping it forward and then pulling it back, what I'm doing is I'm kind of just doing this. So we're going up into the from the O, or, so we get a little bit of mouth closing, and we're gonna go order, order, order. So it kind of just goes from that you tap the tip of the tongue, and then you just pull it back into a full order, order, order. There might be a little bit of pullback. That might make it easier or harder, but as long as you have a solid sound before and a solid sound after, with that little tap in the middle, however you can physically create that combination is fine. But that's how it feels in my mouth. Like we're curling up into the R, tapping really quick, and then finishing the R. So definitely very difficult to do. I hope that answers your question. I know it's a little complicated because we have three different pieces that are difficult by themselves, and we're putting them together. So yeah, anyway, good. If we were to look at it without an R-colored or an R-colored O, see, are there other words like further? Further would be from the vowel straight, or no, because that's a th. it's not a flat D. Further, it doesn't exist. Order, quarter, border. I'm thinking of R-colored O's. Harder, so that would be an R-colored fifth vowel harder, harder, and it feels like I'm doing the same thing. I don't have to worry about the O position part of it, which is a little easier. It's just to So as you go from you're immediately already closing into the but then before you complete the you sort of tap and then pull into that completed sound. Harder, harder, harder. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what kind of R it is. That's just going to affect how you flow into the R itself. So, yeah. So any other questions or clarification? At the end of the day, it's practice. Extra trick, So, bring this back to videos. And anyway, I see one person came and left. Sedent isn't saying anything, so maybe he left. Oh, there you are. Okay. What about people who make Retroflex R? Yeah, so that is I do the bunched R. Yeah, so the Retroflex R is with the tip of the tongue up. That's a good question. That's a very good question. I don't really do the Retroflex R. So, and it's very uncomfortable for my mouth to do the Retroflex. But let's explore that. Okay. And then if I do a flap, order, it's so difficult. Order. To me, I mean, it's probably not exactly the same exact position and as natural as somebody who uses the Retroflex R would be, but it feels kind of more like that might be a little easier because for me, since I do the bunched R, when I start the or R or whatever it is, my tongue wants to do this, right? Or maybe have be a little flat, but it doesn't go up on the tip. And because I want to go into that position, sort of like as I'm going into it, I have to sort of bring this up and tap and then pull into the full R. If you use the Retroflex R, then as you're starting to form the R, the tongue should already be kind of up there, at least towards the end of that formation as it's coming up. So it should just kind of flow into the tap and then pull around. So it actually would sort of move around like that, I would assume. If I try to do it, it kind of feels like that. So I would imagine that might be easier. but that's just me. Yeah, but either way, it doesn't matter if you have retroflex or bunch R. It's a difficult combination, no matter what you do. It all comes down to practice, 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 practice. And what you can also do, like if you use one R normally and you're comfortable with that R, it sounds good. There's not much problem. Maybe for this particular combination, if doing the other kind of R is just easier and you can make a nice, good, natural sound with the other R in this, flow of sounds, um, then you can practice this specific combination with the other R and get used to that. And then you'll build up the muscle memory that in this case, this is what your tongue does, and it'll just naturally do it. So um, there are probably even native speakers who do that, subconsciously they're not aware of it, but maybe when they were babies, they found it easier in certain combinations to, switch between different R's. And so maybe they do that. Who knows? We don't usually see the inside of people's mouths. So I think retroflex is more like the front part is up and curled back. Well, what am I talking about? So, like, I don't even see how that's physically possible for an R. That's. I have to look this up. Because I've seen some other teachers talk about the R and how they describe it, at least from what I've seen, is the front of your tongue is kind of like up like this, and it's sort of pointed towards your front teeth here on the inside. They don't usually describe it as like being up and curled back. Like maybe I'm thinking of that too dramatically, but let me look this up. Retroflex R. Maybe I'm thinking of a different kind of R. Okay, so yeah, there's an image here. L compared to R. Yeah. I see the images they're making. I don't see how that, number one, I don't see how that can produce an R sound. Number two, I don't see how that's physically possible to do with the tongue. That would be extremely uncomfortable. Huh. Interesting. Wikipedia. R color vowel, retroflex consonant. Yeah, there's all kinds of R stuff. R is one of the stupidest sounds between languages because I'm finding a bunch of different types of retroflex information. R is so stupid between languages because that's how I make it. Oh, well, if it works and it sounds like a good solid like an American R sound, or I guess an English R sound, then that's no problem. But again, in this particular combination, if it's really difficult for you to do, you might want to change it up. At the end of the day, as long as you can make a good solid sound, number one, first you want to be understandable, right? That's the first goal. So whatever the sound is or whatever the combination is, first you need to get it to a point where it's close enough to how a native would speak that it's understandable. And that's usually not too much of a problem, maybe with some sounds for learners, but most sounds it's not a big deal, especially consonant sounds. But to get that sort of naturalness, especially in certain combinations like this, the way that you physically produce that doesn't particularly matter as long as it sounds good, right? And so, of course, you need feedback for that, from a native speaker, an American speaker, preferably in this case, and they can tell you, how it sounds. But as long as you can do a good sound, it doesn't really matter. But the R is so stupid between languages because I'm not quite a polyglot, but I've looked at a lot of languages. And I mean, you could do what would be identified as an R, right, in various languages. There's in English. There's Of course, in British English, they have the other type of R, which is more like a schwa sound, kind of like water, right? Um, there's in German they have like a throat R, like or something like that. French, of course, they have sort of that back type sound. I'm not super familiar with French, but I hear they have that, so maybe I'm not completely accurate on that. Japanese has sort of this like D L combination R, which is very similar to a single tap trill R, but it's not quite. And then what else? Yeah. And then, of course, in Portuguese, they use the letter R, but depending on, I think it's depending on the placement. Yeah, if it's at like the start of the syllable or something, it's actually pronounced as an H sound. Um, so it's not even an R sound at all. It's an H. It's just it's just breath. What we would call in English an H sound. Um, yeah, it depends on the placement. That's right. Because they also have a, depending on the dialect of Portuguese, they have an actual or a type sound. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Another question: when you make second vowel sound, does the tip of your tongue touch anywhere, or does it touch your teeth? Absolutely, 100% not. A vowel sound, by definition, does not touch anything. The technical exceptions to that might be the vowel, where maybe the sides of your tongue in the back can be touching. It doesn't have to, but that can happen. Or with see, with a half L vowel, maybe you're kind of touching along the sides here. But as for the actual placement of the sound itself, it should be nowhere near the teeth, because vowels are open, even in a relatively closed position like E or I, the first vowel or second vowel. There has to be enough space between where the tongue is and whatever else is around it. Otherwise, it's going to constrict the flow of air to the point where it starts sounding like a consonant. So if I try to do but I get too close to the teeth, eh, 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 See, it's almost, I mean, it's not quite a th because I'm not pushing out the breath that way, but it doesn't really sound like a vowel. And there I'm trying to stick my tongue out a little bit more. Can you show me and come close to the camera and make second vowel sound? Like a proper vowel, second vowel sound. Well, I mean, I have videos for that, you know. So if I do this properly, you probably can't see it still, but I'll try to open my mouth a little bit more. So, so I'm going to open it a little bit more than normal, but eh, 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 eh. You probably can't really see it very well. But it feels to me like there's the top of the mouth and the teeth, right? So we have this like normal. And for E, it's very close up here. It's not quite touching. Right? It's very close up here. I is going to be just a little bit lower. And in fact, you can kind of just do this to make the I sound. But if this is where the teeth are, to me, it feels kind of like it's like back here. It's not going to be anywhere near up here. So if I try to do that, it would be like I, 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 I. And that just it's kind of weird. However, I will tell you this: the great thing about vowels, because they're open positions, right? They're sort of suspended in space. You have to just use a part of your tongue without really actually making contact or coming too close to anything else in your mouth. All vowel sounds have a range by default. They have a range. Now, the limits of that range are going to depend on what are the other vowel sounds in the language. So, for example, in Spanish, they have E and which are a little bit different than the English first vowel and third vowel, E and but they're pretty similar, especially the E. But they don't have the second vowel like we do in English. So I've actually heard, and I've talked to Spanish speakers about this. I've actually heard in songs, for example, there's a song called Sin ti, which means without you. Now, the letter I in Spanish is supposed to be pronounced E, right? Is that first vowel. So it should be sin ti, and usually that is how it will come out. But there's a song by I think the artist is Samo. He used to be part of the band Camila, which is one of my favorite bands. And very clearly to my English speaking ear, when he starts the chorus, it starts like, he says sin ti da, 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 da. He says sin, not seen, it's sin. It's very perfectly a second vowel in English. But Spanish speakers don't notice because they don't have the second vowel. So the boundaries, the limit between what would be interpreted as a first vowel and the Spanish second vowel, which is the English third vowel, more or less, you can sort of have more or less accuracy and still hit the right sound. It's the same in English, except now with these three sounds, for example, we have the one in between, and so there's less room for error. You have to be a little more accurate between all of these sounds because otherwise you start sounding like the one below or above it. So front, back, up, down, there's a little bit of leeway. There's sort of a circle of center of gravity for each vowel. As long as you're within that and you don't get too close to the line between the two, then you're fine. So there's actually no perfect position for any vowel sound. And he also said I was under the impression that it touches behind of the teeth. Yeah, so it doesn't touch anything. That's so true. You have a really good knowledge of sounds. Well, thank you. I suppose these are things that, for the most part, I've just noticed through observation and reflection. Because I do seem to have a little bit of a talent for sounds, and it's one reason why I'm very curious about the pronunciation of languages. I just like being able to produce different sounds. But like this whole idea of like a center of gravity, sort of a range, like I learned that through Spanish. I didn't realize it at first until later, but I was like, oh yeah, like, as I'm trying to teach English learners, I realized, oh, in Spanish, there's a bigger gap here and you don't have to be as accurate. And so it was just through experience, it's just things that you notice. So, yeah. Anyway, any other questions, comments, other things? Which I don't know. I think I don't pay, well, I pay attention to comments, but I don't remember who comments on what video. I don't know if you saw I wish we had more people here. I know, me too, right? They're missing out. They don't know. We have one other person here who hasn't commented, so I don't know who that is, but hi, second person. Feel free to say hi if you wish. YouTube just tells me there's two. It doesn't tell me who they are, but I don't know if you saw what is it? The T lesson that I recently posted a few days ago. But the opening to that, I'm really curious. Nobody's mentioned it or commented on it yet. But I sort of did a little bit of comedy in the beginning of that. So I don't know if you watched that and if you had any opinion on what I did there, but and if you haven't watched it, that's fine. But yeah, I'm trying to make my videos a little more engaging if I can, because it's great to. Oof, that's very loud. Okay, good. You did watch it. Well, thank you. So yeah, what did you think of that? That sort of opening part with the tea and all that? Because I did the opening skit where it was like tea time, but then I also said, right, we're not talking about that tea. It's this is America, all that stuff. I couldn't, when I was editing it, I kept playing the part where it was like the good, the bad, the ugly, and it shows me, and I'm pretending to pick my nose, and then I'm like, me, oh, like I kept replaying that in the editor because I was laughing so hard. Maybe I'm just stupid for that. I thought it was really funny. Da 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 da. Hmm. I don't know what this refers to. Da 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 da. Wait. Oh yeah, duh. I'm stupid. I think yeah, that was the opening to the D lesson, wasn't it? Da 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 da. Yeah, that was it. I already forgot about that. To be honest, I couldn't think of a good little intro clip for the D lesson, and I was just like, well, let's be overly dramatic. Da 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 da. I don't know if that exists in other cultures, but that's something that we might do in English. So yeah, but yeah, I'm trying to make my lessons more engaging. I'm trying not to get too complicated because I know that I'm talking to intermediate to advanced learners, but I want it to be, as understandable as possible for as many people. So, um, um, I try not to use in the intros, I try not to use things that are too fancy or, relies on, like puns and stuff, relying on knowledge of other things, unless they're very simple. T and the letter T, that's pretty easy. But yeah, because it's nice to just speak into a camera and give you guys the information and put up some words or images and stuff, and I think that's a good format. But I also think it could be a little more interesting, so I'm trying to think of ways to do that. But okay, well, we're at a half hour. It's good. Good start. Good first half hour. Um, any other questions? I'm here for questions. You could also just give me a topic. I mean, I could talk about it. I don't know what you guys want me to talk about. Pronunciation, obviously, a lot of you are probably here for pronunciation. But what about pronunciation? That's um, yeah. I'm looking up at my board here because that has all my stuff, my guidance of things that I'm gonna do. I do have a lot of interesting new ideas for TikTok though, and after certain points, I plan on sort of taking my TikTok videos, restitching them together, and putting them into YouTube videos. So you'll see them eventually, but they're going to be originally designed for TikTok. So if you want to see those, um, you know, sooner rather than later, you can go on TikTok. If you want to, of course. I know TikTok is controversial, but let's see. What else to talk about? I don't know. I could just keep talking. You can listen to my beautiful voice. As people keep saying, I have such a lovely, except when I burp, such a lovely, soothing voice. So wonderful, which I disagree. But let's see. That's another thing. If you guys have any ideas for the live streams aside from questions or answers, because I have a big whiteboard over there, but um, I don't have a more portable whiteboard I can sort of use here in front of the camera. And I wouldn't really know what to teach you guys that I wouldn't just put into a lesson. I mean, I guess I could just post it as a regular lesson. It just happens to be originally live, but then it wouldn't have all the polished stuff of it like a regular lesson. Um, yeah, I don't know. You guys are so quiet. Gotta make this more lively. I bet Seedon's working. Let's see. If you're approximately, I think you're about 12 hours. I think it's 12 hours or so, 12 and a half hours apart. Then right now it's going to be, what, 2 a.m.? And if you work at night, that means you're probably working. So maybe that's why you're so quiet. $3:07. Okay, so it's 13 and a half hours. Wait, how does that work? Hold on. I'm really bad with numbers. 12 hours would be 1:37 in the morning. 13 hours would be 2:37 in the morning. So 13 and a half, yeah. That's right. I really, really hate numbers. I mean, they're useful and all, just my brain doesn't like them. So that's why I teach English and not math. Let's see. I don't know. We have 3 people here. No questions. Come on, guys. I'm here to answer your questions. You have a native speaker who is a certified English teacher right here saying, ask me a question. And you're just like, I'm just going to watch. I don't have any questions. That's fine. Okay, well, I guess I'll think of something to talk about and just start talking about that. Good question. So, I don't know. Pronunciation, grammar, contractions. I could talk about contractions. That's something I keep meaning to make videos about, but I'm just so absorbed in the pronunciation course. So I'll just start talking about contractions, and if you guys have any other questions about anything or questions about what I'm talking about, feel free to leave those in the comments. But I probably talked about contractions before, but one thing that a lot of English learners don't know, apparently, because I guess you guys were taught wrong or you just were never told, is that contractions are not informal. I asked my questions, waiting for others to ask some questions. I know, right? See, he's waiting. He's waiting on you guys too. I don't know who's here, but I know there are 3 people. So there are 2 other people. You can ask questions. It's okay. Anyway, contractions are not informal. Contractions are not informal. I will say that a million times. Contractions are not informal. Now, what is a contraction? Just so we're all on the same page. For example, I am becomes I'm. Okay. This is not informal. It is not informal. It is the normal way that we speak and the normal way that we write. There is some details of contractions do deal with the differences between written and spoken language. We actually have more spoken contractions than written contractions. Another thing many English learners don't know. But in general, especially the very common basic contractions that you probably learned about, like I'm, your, we're, or with the future, I'll, he'll, we'll, whatever. These are a very normal, natural part of how we talk. And in fact, so common, normal, and natural that if you do not use them, either A, you will sound very unnatural, or B, it might sound like you are emphasizing, because one of the only reasons why we might uncontract, especially in spoken speech instead of a spoken speech, and it's the spoken language rather than the written language, is to emphasize. That's one of the few reasons we have to actually uncontract. So, and we could do that in a number of ways. Let's bring some intonation into this as well. If you have something, let's go ahead and say he is. That's kind of neutral. Sometimes when we talk about I or you, things get a little weird depending on how we're talking about them, but let's talk about he is really quick. So he is, that's the uncontracted form, and that is not normally how we say it. We normally say he's. Okay, no problem. Now notice, of course, the S is a Z sound in the word is, and we keep that Z sound in he's. So he's easy. Now, also a common mistake that English learners make is they will see he's, but then they'll pronounce he is. Do not do that. That's especially if you see it written, that's the way you want to say it, because as I said, we have even more spoken contractions than written contractions. So however you see it written is how it should be actually spoken and pronounced. The other way around might be a little more complicated, but anyway, so he's done, easy. Now, what happens if we want to emphasize? Okay, for example, if I say he's a teacher, let's say he's a student. You guys are students. Okay, he's a student. Now, in this sentence, the normal intonation would just be he's a student. It's just a statement, right? He's a student. So stress on stu for student. That gets the stress. We fall at the end, following intonation, because it's the end of just a normal statement. He's is not stressed. A is not stressed. And it's just nice and easy. He's a student. Okay. But if I want to emphasize, because maybe I want to clarify, maybe you think that he's a teacher. I don't know. Now I could just make a clarifying statement by saying, "Oh no, he's a student." Same thing, same intonation, no big deal. Or again, depending on the context, the exact details, that's going to depend on how we change the intonation. But I could potentially say he's a student. Now it sounds like I'm pointing him out compared to somebody else. You think that person's a student. No, he's a student. Okay, so I'm giving intonation to the contracted form. That's one thing I can do, potentially. So that would be the first way to emphasize. You leave it contracted, you just add the intonation or higher stress. Now, what we could also do is if I say he is a student, he is a student. Is, the verb to be, is usually not stressed. Usually not stressed. There are some cases for it to be stressed, but in general, the verb to be is just an equal sign, right? It's what we call a stative verb. It's not actually an action. It just describes this equals that. Okay. So because of that, it doesn't usually get any stress. And that's one reason why it contracts, why we can sort of why we can get rid of that, the vowel sound in is or am or whatever it is, and sort of bring it back into the previous word, he's or I'm. But if I uncontract them and I actually say the full word is, actually what I could do first, before I emphasize is, I can just not emphasize is and uncontract them. He is a student. He is a student. There's not a whole lot of extra emphasis there. And by just uncontracting it, now it sounds like I'm kind of emphasizing, like, no, I'm telling you, and like, you don't believe me. I'm saying, no, he is a student, right? Now, if I want to make that even stronger, right? Like I keep telling you, and you say, no, there's no way he's a student. I say, no, he is a student. Okay, now I can make it even more. And so again, whether it's clarification or some other reason that you would have to increase the stress or intonation, that depends on the context. You can't just do that for no special reason. But uncontracting is one way or one part of the way that we might show more emphasis for something. So in normal actual speech, if you don't have a special reason to uncontract it, you want to contract it. And so, of course, let's talk a little bit about the tenses and how the tenses contract. So we'll have, for example, let's say, okay, I'm tall. No big deal. So I am tall, I'm tall. You're tall. Supposed to be capital Y, that doesn't matter, we won't care. Now this is your, right? We say you are, your, but normally this gets reduced. So you might hear it pronounced as your, that's always possible because that's the full pronunciation. But this is usually reduced 98, 99% of the time, and it just becomes your. It's the Y consonant with the vowel sound. That's it, your. So you're tall. We say he's tall, right? We just saw he's. So he's tall. Of course, she's tall. Or it's tall. Okay. Now, note here in pronunciation, he's tall. She's tall. We keep that Z sound from is, right? Remember, it's spelled with an S. We want to focus on the ears. But again, focus on the ears. How do we say IT apostrophe S? It's not it's with a Z. It becomes an S sound. Why? Well, one of the strange things that can happen in English is this doesn't always happen necessarily, but it is a common thing that can happen. When you have things like this where, say, an apostrophe S or a plural S is normally pronounced with a Z in a particular word, it's usually pronounced with a Z because the sound before it is voiced, especially if it's a voiced consonant. That's not always true, but that's a very common pattern in English. Now, if for some reason we get a change, where like in this case, we're getting rid of the vowel I in is, and then we're just left with the T straight to the S, well, the T is voiceless. And so it actually affects the pronunciation of the S because it's easier to say. So instead of a Z sound, it now is an actual S sound. It's. So we have it's tall. Okay. We're tall. This is an R-colored E or an R-colored I, which are both basically the same. It doesn't really matter. You can say it we're or where. Doesn't matter. And then, of course, we have there, which is they are, contracted, which they're tall. So the pronunciation there, notice I said there, meaning T-H-E-R-E, is the same. So this word, and this word are all pronounced the same. Technically speaking, I believe the first one is supposed to be more of like an A sound, like they're. But in actual everyday speech, we usually pronounce all three of these exactly the same. In fact, a common native speaker mistake is to not remember the proper spelling for the word that they're using. So they might say, instead of they're tall, they might write like this, they're tall. That's not correct. That's the wrong spelling because they sound the same. So even us natives have some problems when we have cases like this, and that's normal, so no big deal. But things, yeah. So, and this, of course, is an R-colored third vowel, there. You can use air and make it an R-colored A diphthong. That's fine, but there's no need for that, as I talked about in previous videos before. They're tall. Okay, now, so it's very basic present tense. contractions, right? You probably already know that. Again, this is a normal, common part of everyday speech. It is not informal, not informal. It is a normal part of speech that if you want to sound natural, you are usually, in most cases, going to use these contractions in both speech and writing, okay? Now, what about the future tense, right? Because the past tense doesn't contract. And the reason the past tense doesn't contract, right? The simple past, not the past continuous or the past perfect, but just the simple past, right? Like he was walking. Or that's continuous. He was tall. That's kind of weird. Yeah, I guess now because he's older, right? He sort of shrank. He's not as tall. So he was tall. Or maybe he's dead now. So past tense. Okay. If we were to contract this, it would be pronounced he's, just like he is. And so we wouldn't know if it's present tense or past tense. So because of that, the past tense, simple past tense, does not contract. Okay. And again, we're talking about contractions with to be, right? Just statements. We're not talking about the negative or anything like that. We can talk about that too if you guys want. But he was tall, you can't contract that, right? Or she was tall, it was tall. They were tall, can't contract it, right? If we use the past continuous, does that work? If we say he was walking, can we contract that? Well, the same problem, right? He's walking, that sounds like present tense because we contract the present and simple and continuous. And so because of that, if you try to contract the past here, we're not going to know if it's present or past. So that's the good thing, right? You don't have to worry about the contractions in the simple past like this. Now, of course, if it's negative and you say he wasn't tall, that contraction does exist. The negative contraction, I'm pretty sure, exists in every single case. Like anytime there's a possible contraction, there will be a negative possibility, especially with pronouns. So it could be like shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't, doesn't, didn't, verbs that are to be, verbs that are not to be. The negative pretty much always contracts. So that's sort of a special thing that is also easy to remember because it's just N apostrophe T and you just add nt to the end and you're done, right? That's the good part. Now in the future tense, of course, I will, which becomes I'll. Now, the exact pronunciation of this, there's a lazy way to do it. There's a proper way to do it. It doesn't really matter. The full proper way would be with I, L colored. I'll, which is actually kind of, there's like a small y between it. It's not actually L colored. I'll. You could L color I'll instead of I'll. Or there's a lazy way to do it, which is like all. It sounds very similar to all with the fifth vowel. You can actually use the fifth vowel there, or you can say al with a fourth vowel, L colored. So this particular word actually has quite a few pronunciations, especially if we get lazy with it. Don't worry too much about that. Just know that there's different ways to say it. But that contracts in writing and in speech very commonly, very, very commonly. And I should note here that in writing, if you're writing formally, then yes, you are not going to contract as much. There are still some contractions that, like with the simple present, that even in formal writing, we still tend to use them just because they're so common. They're so basic. But even then, like in that case, we might not, especially if it's super formal writing. Usually you probably won't have to worry about that. Like if you're learning English for school, then maybe if you're writing like an essay, possibly. Well, an essay, no, but like an academic research paper, maybe. That's formal enough where you might not use contractions. If it's a very formal business document, not like an email. Business emails, we use contractions all the time, no big deal. It doesn't really give much formality to uncontract. That's not the role of contractions. So it's really only in super, super formal type of writing that we tend to uncontract. But of course, you will see in writing there are times where there are reasons for this that I can talk about later, but there are times where you will see it uncontracted in writing. And it's just because it's writing. I know that doesn't make sense, but um, writing sort of like you can think of it like the gravity of writing wants to sort of like pull it to an uncontracted form a bit. Um, but unless it's super, super formal, we will like there's no problem with contracting. You know, you might still see things that are uncontracted, but there's no problem with contracting. Like you can do it, it's just fine. I do it all the time. Other natives do it all the time. Um, it's kind of a tricky topic of where's the line where you should not contract or should you contract? Because again, remember, sometimes we use the uncontracted form for emphasis. That also includes in writing. Um, so if I want to convey the intonation in writing, like I will do it, I will do it, then I'm not going to write that contracted, right? So you might see it uncontracted, but you can't hear my intonation. So one of the reasons I uncontracted it in writing is to help give that extra emphasis, right? So that's a reason you might see it uncontracted, not because of formality. So it's not so simple there. But back to the contractions here. I'll, first person, obviously. We also have you'll. Now this, again, just like your reduces to your, this is supposed to be you'll with an O, but with an oo, you'll, which would be like an L-colored oo sound. But this can actually reduce to you'll, which many people would probably say is an L-colored schwa, and you can definitely do it that way. That's not a problem. I would say it's an L-colored high schwa, which is my word for that. What is it? The short oo or whatever, the horseshoe symbol in the IPA. High schwa. I have a video on that. Just look for high schwa, English Hacks high schwa, and you'll see that. But you'll. Okay. So we see sometimes with contractions, pronunciation can change, right? If you leave it uncontracted, you will. You will. And we get a connection between you and will. They flow into each other. You will. But it's you, right? It's not you will. Although we can reduce you to ya, so I guess you could still do that in this case because you is special. But then it would be ya will, where we have the extra sound between the well, we have the ya and the wi instead of just yull with the y sound and the L colored vowel. So moving on, of course, we have heel, which can be reduced also to the second vowel. It's supposed to be the vowel he, heel, but you can reduce it to I, like it, and pronounce it more like the word hill. That's perfectly fine. If you're a little more lazy, perfectly fine. Hill. He'll do it tomorrow. Same thing with shield. You can reduce that to shill. Is an English word, much less common, but it's pronounced the same. Second vowel sound. Shill. Shill. No problem. With it, of course, we can contract that in the future as well. It'll. It'll. Now notice here, it by itself, fully pronounced, we push the T. It. Okay. Normally, we won't push the T. It's at the end of the word. So if it doesn't connect to anything, we'll do a glottal stop. It. And all vowels, by default in English, if there's nothing before them, start from a glottal stop position. So you're going to hear the I come out of that closed position, and then it's going to go back into the closed position. And we interpret that as IT. Okay. But when we contract it and will, we get it'll. And this is a flap to D. It'll. And we're going to flap that D into O, which you could describe a number of different ways. I would simply describe it as going straight into the half L itself, the dark L sound, which I also have videos on. You can look up half L sound. And my video will probably be the first one to pop up. But why does that happen? Why does this change? Well, one reason is because of the T. The T, I'm thinking of making, I'm probably going to make one more T lesson before I move to the next consonant sound in the pronunciation course, talking about the various ways that the T sound changes. Not when it's just spelling, like nation is just SH sound spelled with a T, right? Nation. And I talked about that in the main T lesson, but there are cases like this where, right, depending on what's around it, it could be a glottal stop, it could be a fully pronounced T if we push it out. We saw with it is contracted, it's, we actually have the TS, sort of push the S through the T, so there's a T there. If we say it is, and we actually the I is, and the I and is, it becomes a flat D because it connects to the vowel I, it is. Or in this case, it's connecting to that half L vowel, which again is one reason why I call it a vowel sound. It'll. And so it's becoming a flap D again. So I'm probably going to make that lesson this weekend. I just have to put together some details and see if I have enough material for a full lesson for that. But if not, maybe I can do a little short lesson on it. But anyway, I'll, you'll, he'll, she'll, it'll, wheel. This is supposed to be E, an L colored E. David, I haven't heard from you in a while. How you doing? I haven't even heard from you on Patreon. You're just like, you disappeared. I hope everything is good. If not, that's okay. We don't have to talk about it. I know the world sucks right now, but hopefully everything's good. You can go ahead and I'm just going to keep talking. You can leave comments and respond if you want. But yeah, with wheel, it's L colored first vowel, E, right? Wheel. But this can actually be reduced to sound exactly like will with that first vowel. Because in the word will, if you actually say the word will and don't contract it, it's the first vowel like it, but L colored. So wheel can be pronounced like will, only in the contracted. If it's this word wheel, that has to be an L colored E, first vowel sound. Glad to be here. I'm sorry, I was busy with work related nonsense. Yes, okay. No problem. Things happen. Just glad to hear from you. Glad to have you back. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'm just kind of talking about contractions because nobody has any questions. You can talk to Seedent also if you want. I'll keep my eye on the chat, but any questions are always welcome for everybody who's here. Yes, so as I was saying, the word wheel, like the wheel of a car, has to be the first vowel, L colored. You can't reduce that to will. But this contracted we will can be reduced. We also go over contractions with had when used with past. Okay, good. Yeah, I'm kind of just like, I started at the simple present and right now I'm on the future. So I was actually about to go into that direction as soon as I finished the future tense. So good question. We're on track then. I will have to talk about have first because that sort of sets the basis for that. So, of course, after wheel, we have they'll. They'll. And notice I said they'll. That's a very lazy way to say it. It's supposed to be they'll, where it's the A diphthong plus a half L or dark L. There are sirens and a helicopter. So hopefully that's not too loud in the background for you guys. But yeah, will, etc., etc. They'll. Sirens are distracting me. They'll. You can just make it the third vowel de, and then do L color. They'll. Anything between they'll and they'll is perfectly fine. If you're enunciating, you do want to make it a, right? Because anytime we enunciate, we tend to go more for the full pronunciation. Not the uncontracted pronunciation, just the full pronunciation of whatever it is. But yeah, there's the option there to reduce that A diphthong into the third vowel E. Okay, now that's the future. So we talked about the present. We talked about how the simple past and the past continuous doesn't contract with, unless it's a negative wasn't, that's fine. But if it's just a regular positive statement, it doesn't contract because then we don't know if it's present or past. Then we just talked about future, pretty simple. And again, all of these, the present and the future, both of these, are not informal. They are not informal. Okay, you will see them in writing commonly, not always necessarily, but commonly. And you will definitely hear them more often than not in speech, regardless of the formality level. Now, moving on to the present perfect. Okay, now we're moving up in the world. So the perfect tenses. Perfect tenses. I feel like if I go through and edit this later, I should put up a fancy screen that says perfect tenses. The kingdom of the perfect. So this, of course, is where we have like have done, right? Or have been if we're using to be. And of course, now we actually expand. When we're talking about contractions in the simple present and simple present and future, well, just present tense in general and the future tense, we actually no, just a simple present. With the present tense, we're focusing on contractions with to be because do does not contract, eat does not contract with the subject. It'll contract maybe with the negative don't, right? That's a negative contraction, but if you say I do or I eat, there's no contraction there. With will, it doesn't matter what the verb is. I will be, I will go, I will do. So it's just this, the subject will contract with will, usually. With the perfect tenses, we get a very similar thing. So it doesn't really matter what that main verb is, the done, been, eaten, seen, gone. We're contracting the have part. So, of course, we have I have been or done, put been or done. And so it's going to be I've. We keep the E in the writing of the apostrophe, the writing of the contraction, but there's no E sound. The E is always still silent. It's I diphthong, I plus the, I've. Okay, we have you've. So that one is you. See if we say yuv, can we reduce that? You have been there. You've been there. Yeah, very informally, you can still say yeah and contract it. That's okay, but this is usually you've. Now, of course, with he has been or done. So instead of contracting with the B, we're going to contract with an S. And actually, it's a Z sound, just like an is, has, same thing. So he's. Now, how do we know that this is present perfect and not simple present? Well, if I say he's tall, or if I say he's been tall, which is a little strange to say, but grammatically, right, we know that it's the contraction of has because we have another verb after it, right? Or he's eaten, right? So we know that's has, not is. Now, of course, in the passive voice, he is eaten, which would be painful. That's another topic. We don't have to worry about passive voice. But he's eaten. Okay. Now, she's, of course, same thing. It's, and we're going to change that Z sound into an S because we're pushing that voiceless T, pushing the S to the voiceless T. It's, we've, and they've. And you could probably say with and they've in a very lazy way. It's okay, not a problem, but we think of these as we've and they've. Those are the proper ways to pronounce them. Okay, so no big deal, right? We've done, they've done, it's done, he's done, I've done, you've done. Okay. Past perfect. To get to David's question. And make sure I have any details. Will you go over contractions with had when used with past participle, etc.? Okay. So this would be the past perfect. This would be I had been eaten or whatever it is. Okay. So we won't worry about the grammar here. That's not the focus of this question. If you guys have questions about the grammar of the past perfect, we can talk about that as well, but for pronunciation and the contraction. So this will, even in writing, this might get a little less common in writing, but there's a special reason for that. But this will usually still contract into I'd. So just like I have becomes, or I have or he has becomes I've or he's. I had becomes I'd, and he has. Right, he had, because it's the same, right? I had, you had, he had. It's the same form for this aspect to the past perfect. So he had becomes he'd. Now, of course, we have you'd, she'd, it we'll come back to in a second. Weed. So this sounds exactly like weed, which you may either pick up from, pull out of your garden or smoke, depending on what we're talking about. Family-friendly content, right? It was just legalized in a bunch of states, so it's out there. Anyway, sometimes I say stupid things. Ignore me. They'd. The pronunciation of these don't usually reduce. Weed doesn't really become wid. Like this is just weird. So we're gonna use the full pronunciation of the word we, they, he, whatever, and then just put a D sound at the end. Now, without anything after it or around it, if you're not clearly enunciating, right, they'd. Obviously, there's going to be something after it because it's the past perfect. We need another verb, right? Even if it's just that one extra word, we need they'd what, right? So it might be a glottal stop sometimes. It might connect if I say, I don't know, I'd already eaten. So I had already eaten. I'd already. I'd all. So we're going to flap that D, connect it to the all. I'd already. You don't have to do it that way. One thing I'm going to be talking about a lot more with the D and the T, especially, because there's so much potential variation, is there's various things that can come out. Just like you often reduces to ya, but you don't have to reduce it to ya. It's just commonly pronounced that way, but it might not come out that way sometimes. It's the same thing. So the standard would be here, you flap the D into already, I'd already, he'd already, she'd already. But it might be he'd already eaten, right? Maybe I'm thinking for the he'd already eaten, or he'd already. I might kind of push that D out just to emphasize, clarify, make sure that you hear that it's that past perfect if I really want to make it sure that's what I'm using. And in American English, that's actually important because the perfect tenses, especially the past perfect, compared to British English, American English does not like to use them. This is another thing many English learners don't know. You're taught the grammar in school, but if you're learning American English, the past perfect in particular, it's not that we don't use it, it's that we compare. Okay, if you look at the formal grammar, like when the grammar says we should use it, American English tends not to use it. And it's not like we use it in other places. It's just that if the simple past is clear of which action happened first, which it usually is from the context, then Americans prefer just to use the simple past. The times that I notice that we tend to use the past perfect is as we're explaining something, and in that moment we realize, just sort of intuitively, we feel, oh yeah, if I use the simple past, we don't think about it this way, we just feel it. If I use the simple past, it won't be clear which action happened first, or it might be confusing. We'll immediately sort of switch our thought into the past perfect. And so it's usually used to avoid confusion in American English. That's sort of a complicated thing, but that's the basic idea. There's a whole whole bunch of stuff I need to teach you guys about the perfect tenses, especially the present perfect. But in the future, I'll probably cut this out and put a video out of it, make it into a video, and then later I'll have a formal lesson on it. But okay, now the one I didn't talk about is it apostrophe D. Now this does exist too, right? It had done, right? Say the cat had already eaten. Okay. So it, but how do we pronounce that? How do we pronounce that? Is it a glottal stop, T? We say it, id, or we're supposed to do a glottal stop D too, right? So is it, like, how does that work? How do we pronounce this? Well, the interesting thing is, because there's no syllable between the T and the D, right? So there's not supposed to be anything for the T to connect to. We just have to go to and d. Itted, right? That would be like overly clearly pronounced. The way we naturally say this, are you ready? It's with a flapped D. Yes, a flapped D. You could push out a T, that's fine. Itted, but itted. So it's going to sound like eh. And then probably we would describe this as a schwa sound. But because there's nothing between it, but we have that T sound, we need to sort of bounce the T into something. And this is the same reason why the pronunciation of the past tense ed, at E is usually silent. And then the D will be a D if the previous sound is voiced. It'll be a T if the previous sound is voiceless. But if a verb ends with a T or a D sound, when we release it, because we have that tapped version, we need to release it into something. And so it's unlike all the other sounds. And so we tend to add I and actually pronounce that E, that silent E. So we'll say, like, I don't know, what's the word? Weighted, right? And we'll flap that T into the I so that there's actually a sound between the T and the D. So when we say it apostrophe D, it's itted, and that becomes a flapped D sound. Okay. That's the basics. I hope that answers your question. I don't know if you have any other specific questions related to that. There is another use of the contraction apostrophe D, which is not had. That's another thing that English learners often get confused about, especially because this is a little bit more higher level grammar. It's not as commonly talked about at the lower levels, which is would. It would. Not could, not should. Okay, this is reserved specifically for would, because if we did it with also could and should, we wouldn't know if we're saying would, could, or should, right? So it's only would. So I would becomes I'd. Again, very common. It's not informal. This is a common, normal, everyday part of speech. Now, how do we know if it's I had or I would? There has to be a reason, otherwise this contraction wouldn't be possible with would, because we already use it for had. Well, the way we know is because of the form of the verb, right? If we say I had gone, it'd be I'd gone, and we see gone. Well, if it's that third form of the verb, then it has to be had, because that's what changes it to gone. But if it's go, and we see I'd go, then that's I would go, because we use go after would. So because we can tell the difference, we can contract I had apostrophe D, I would apostrophe D. Same thing. Brilliant stuff. Thank you. By the way, I have an unrelated question. Is the G in stronger pronounced? Oh, I knew this question was going to come up eventually. Take a drink before I answer that. So, funny that you should ask. This is actually something that I find difficult to address in my phonetic transcription, because my phonetic transcription document covers pretty much all cases. As far as I know, it covers all cases. I might be forgetting something, but this is one point where I was like, how do I address this? For some reason, this is kind of annoying. It's because it's English, right? We gotta love English. In the word stronger specifically. Okay. So is the G pronounced, or yeah, is it more like the and then where we don't really have the G? Now we know that the NG, the G just kind of represents that it's the back N. Okay, it's not a normal N. Up here, we're going to use the back of the tongue in the K or the K or G position. We close here, it goes to the nose. Okay, that's the third nasal sound in English. And we also know, well, you might not know, you, David, specifically, I know you know, but other people watching this might not know. Many English learners think that the G, the G, is supposed to be pronounced. So they would say strong, right? Or in this case, stronger, with really pushing out that G. Now, by default, right, without any ER after it or anything, just this consonant sound, there's not supposed to be a G. There's not supposed to be a G. It's just it's a nasal sound. It's not G, it's When you release that, it's possible that maybe a little tiny bit of a G might come out, right? Strong. You're not really supposed to hear it as a G. It's supposed to sound like a released nasal, just like if I release the N. You sort of hear it shift back into the mouth from the nose. But a little bit of a G is okay, regardless of what the word is. It could be sing. You hear a little tiny bit of a G. It's okay. Not supposed to be there. It's okay, though. That's what it's supposed to be. Okay, now, what I have noticed, when the NG, or this nasal sound, connects, if it connects to another word, like sing it, notice, I'm not really saying g. I'm not saying sing it. That doesn't sound too bad. I guess that's okay for some people probably say it that way, but sing it, nye. I'm just really seeing that nasal sound. But particularly in cases where we have the ER ending, or maybe even the ING ending, like singing, maybe. Sometimes, in some words, if I try to put a g there, it sounds absolutely horrible. Like singing. That sounds horrible to me. I would never say that, ever. No G, no g. It's not supposed to be there. But I noticed, for example, with the word anger. Oh, there's a g there. Okay. What if I try to take that g away? Anger. That doesn't sound like the right word anymore. And this is the strange thing. So apparently in English, this is another reason why the English spelling system is so horrible, because this combination, it's supposed to represent one sound, the sound. But in some words, especially in the middle of words like anger or stronger, what I've noticed is that sometimes that g actually becomes the g sound. It's supposed to actually represent the g sound. And how do you know that? You can't tell from the spelling. It's just, for me as a native speaker, I would say, well, this is usually with it, this is usually without it, because that's what I hear, right? Or that's how I pronounce it. So that's how I have heard it growing up, and it's just how I learned to pronounce it. So It's a difficult point, and it sucks. There might be a rule. What's the rule? I don't know. Tell me the rule. um, I'm not the pronunciation god that knows every single rule about everything. So maybe there's something that I don't know here. Um, but if we look at say anger and stronger, if I try to say it without the g, stronger, he gets stronger, stronger. He gets stronger every day, or longer, right? Longer. It's a bit longer than that. I I feel like it's kind of a natural tendency to push the g out, a very light g in that case. But if I try to intentionally say it without the g, it sounds fine. I see no problem with it. It sounds perfectly fine. But if I try to say anger without the g, it sounds horrible. So I don't know what the rule would be, because it's definitely not the fact that it's connecting to an er, the vowel sound. Um, so I don't know if maybe Cedant could pull up the rule, or I'll also do a search here, or anybody can find the rule. We'll do a rule hunt, right? Let's see if we can find this. I don't even know what I would look for with that. NG connection rules, maybe. Yeah, it's not bringing up anything related to English. In English pronunciation. Commented here. I honestly think one has just to memorize the pronunciation. Finger has the good pronounce, but singer does not. Finger, finger. Yeah. Yeah, if I try to say finger without the g, I mean, I can imagine it being said that way, maybe, but I naturally would not say it or sorry, I would, other way, I'm thinking singer. With finger, I can imagine it being said without the g, maybe by somebody. It's like, okay, sure, possibly, but I naturally would say finger, finger with a g. And then, as you said, singer, it's almost like that does connect over to the and we get the whole thing singer instead of like singer with the g connecting over. Cedant says whenever ng and k sound is in the middle of words, and if it's followed by g, then that g is always pronounced as what? That doesn't make any sense. The only way that makes sense to me is if it's like this. Finger ng is in the middle of words, hence the g is also pronounced. Same goes with the word. Oh, okay, but then why is it not pronounced in singer? Because the ng is also in the middle of the word. See, that doesn't work. And right, I'm the teacher here. Why am I asking you? But it's good that you mentioned that, because what that tells me is probably this is the way. Uh, remember, guys, you're learning English, and even if we were talking about, say, Spanish, a phonetic, a language with a phonetic script, in the past, it wasn't always like that, right? And some people came together, right? The Royal Academy of Spain, and they came down. They came together and they said, "Okay, we need to formalize these rules. We need to say, okay, this is this and this is that, or whatever." Okay, and they did that according to the perception of things at the time, right? And so that includes, like, if it's r, they would write it with one r. If it's r, they would write it with two r's. That's a convention in Spanish. They could have chosen not to do that. They could have just said, okay, if it's just one R, you just listen to it, and if you hear it multiple times, it's multiple times. We just spell it with one. They could have chosen to do that. English has a very horrible history when it comes to this, because I believe French, Spanish, German, they all have these like official language bodies that said, okay, this is what this language does. This is how it's pronounced. This is how it's spelled. These are the rules. Where English, we do have grammar rules and this and that, whatever, but when it comes to pronunciation and spelling, we didn't have the same type of thing. I mean, you have institutions like, Oxford and whatever, back in the day that tried to sort of formalize certain things, but we also take in words from other languages. We have like 60% of our vocabulary from, I think, Latin or something like that. It's crazy. And so it's just this big mess that never got formalized into a consistent system. And so a lot of these, maybe not all of them, but a lot of these rules rules for pronunciation. I think a lot of them are based on perception that native speakers have, right? So, and let me see what you guys say here. Maybe it's because singer comes from a verb. Finger does not, possibly. Singer, but finger, finger, isn't made up of finger. Possibly, we can play with that. I can tell you where to find that rule. Type sounds American and check out NG sound video. Okay, so I'm going to do that after I finish my thought, which I was almost done with. Sometimes you have formalized rules where it says like, okay, you know, whenever the NG or the NK is in the middle of a word, then it's supposed to be pronounced. And that's maybe sort of a perception that some native speakers have, where it's like, oh, it's like we can clearly hear it start connecting over. It's in the middle, so good, okay. But that could just be based off of a perception that isn't necessarily accurate. It's not necessarily what always happens. It's just what we think happens. Kind of like with the TH, how we don't officially have a dental T or D, but many natives, in American English at least, will use a dental T or D to make a TH sound, but we don't hear the mental T or mental, yeah, the mental. We don't hear the dental T or D, we hear the TH because, and we swear that that's what we say because we don't have a dental T or D. So it's a perception thing. That could be what's happening. But yes, I'll look this up. Okay, sounds American, NG sound video. Sounds American, NG sound. Okay, let's see. Sounds American. Okay, looks like it's on YouTube. 12 minutes long. Okay, we gotta go through this faster than that. Let's see. Thing. We'll
be using a special phonetic symbol for this sound. However, this sound is often distorted.
Sound is often distorted. Noticeably affects their American pronunciation. Good news. Once you know how it's spelled and how to pronounce it correctly, you will sound more like an American. This is what he's saying.
So,
long, king, yeah, I get it.
G in the middle of a word.
Okay.
Now look.
Okay, middle of a word.
The letter N is still pronounced as
English, finger, jungle.
As it's part of the next syllable.
Okay.
And finally, there's one last case. Listen to these words. Here's a quick one.
So, yeah, okay, so I see that rule there. I don't know if anybody's put any at 223. 223. Yeah, I passed that. So yeah, I got that. Wait, oh yeah. Okay, so at the end of a word, in the middle of a word, g, and then the NK, wherever it occurs, it's unk. So I would agree with that first one and that second one. The at the end of a word should be The G is just spelling. It's the sound. The NK, that's the one that's a little bit different. Yeah. And the K, if it's a K, that's not just spelling, because the G is just there to help us note the difference between the N and the normal N, front N and the back N. Where with the K, it doesn't matter where it is. It could be uncle, you have that K. Or if you have think, right? Now it might be a glottal stop K, right? If we say think, that's a glottal stop K. The K is there. The K is there. Where when we say thing, there's no G there at all. There's no glottal stop G. There's no anything. So you have to be careful there. But whether it's a glottal stop K or an actual pronounced K, if you see NK together, it's going to be unk, using the back N plus K, not a normal N plus K. There might be a couple random exceptions to that, I don't know, but that should be consistent. It should be 100%. You never know with English. So what I disagree with, though, is in the middle. Maybe, so David recommends that maybe because singer as a verb. So we'll explore that. It could also be a dialect thing, like maybe because Sounds American, I think I've heard of that channel before. And if I remember right, I think they probably teach General American. That sounds about right. So, especially if they do teach, look up singer in the dictionary. Okay, let's see what the dictionary says. Well, we know how big of a fan I am of the dictionary when it comes to pronunciation. Not very. Let's see, singer. Okay, singer. Yeah, so there it says there's no G there. There's no G. It's just At least on the dictionary I'm looking at. I also hate the way that the dictionary writes it because even though they're writing it, both whether it's written in English letters or in IPA, they put the ER by itself, and that's one thing I'm trying to fix for you guys. Is it's not singer, right? It's singer, singer. Like the R, the sound is sort of like a bridge where it sounds sort of like it's attached to both syllables. Um, but it connects over to vowels because it's a consonant, even inside words. And the way that the dictionary writes that, how it's like separate, like the verb is, or the vowel sound after it is separate, I highly disagree with that and think the dictionary needs to be changed because it's very misleading. But it could be a dialect thing. Who knows? But if I mean, maybe it's just the dictionary I looked at. Dictionaries in general, if they're American English, they're supposed to be based on General American. Um, so if that dictionary entry I just looked at is General American, which of course we know that it's not always consistent anyway, then I guess maybe singer is supposed to be singer, yeah, it's supposed to be without the g. Notice I did kind of push out a little bit of a g there, singer, singer. That can happen again. That's fine. I'm not saying singer. It's different. But let's see if it's a verb. Okay, is it because it's a verb? Well, let's see. So we have sing. What if we put, let's see, what would work here? That would still have the because, or I guess some other vowel. I guess it would have to be in the middle of a word. So the or some other vowel, but still where the is in the middle of a word. It could also have to do with the fact that it's maybe e. Maybe if we change it to ah or something before the maybe that affects it as well. I don't know, but let's see. Another vowel. Sing. Fling. Fling is a verb. Did I say vowel? I meant verb. Fling is a verb. A flinger would be someone who flings. So instead of finger, we have instead of finger. That sounded so weird. I'm so focused on like not saying it that it's interfering with my pronunciation of when it's supposed to be there. So instead of finger, flinger. If I say flinger, it sounds a little weird. Finger. Sorry. Flinger. There we go. That sounds good. But so it works in that verb. What if we take another one that's not a verb and add to it in a way that still makes sense? Like longer. So now we're changing from e, ah, so that might be why, but longer, longer, longer. Sounds okay. Longer also sounds fine. In this case, they both sound fine to me. It doesn't really matter. I would probably go with trying to pronounce the here. Maybe sounds a little bit better. So, okay. And that's not a verb, so that would roughly be consistent with finger. Anger. Okay, we talked about anger. And I said if I try to drop the or the g, then it sounds horrible. Anger can be a verb, though, right? It can be a verb and it can be, well, to anger someone, anger as a noun. Angry would be the adjective. Yeah, so it could be a noun or a verb. His anger. Don't anger him. Don't anger him. Don't anger him. Don't anger him. Interesting. If I try to use anger as a verb, it actually doesn't sound as bad if I drop the g. Might be because it's a verb. Might be interesting. I don't know. It's a complicated point. I think singer is an exception. Maybe. Could be. Could be. That's also a possibility. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Well, the good news is it's a good thing that this came up because, as I said, the next lesson I want to do is sort of like a variation T sound video. Um, but after that, the next consonant sound I'm going to be talking about in the course is this sound. So I'm going to explore this a little bit more. Ringer. I would ringer, put it on the ringer. Yeah, I would probably not use the g. It sounds a little weird there. Sounds better without the g. But ringer again, that actually has a couple different meanings, but it could be a verb. Well, no, ring is the verb. Let's see, ringer could be a noun in two ways. Ringer, ringer, ringer. Yeah, it's not a verb itself. Well, I mean, singer is also a noun as well. So verb and noun. So interesting, yeah. You would expect ringer to be ringer, but I wouldn't say it that way. Okay, linger, linger, linger. It's still lingering, still lingering. That one sounds, to me, that sounds fine either way. They both sound fine. We're not getting anywhere with this. Let's see here. Singer. Okay, if I were to give you guys, I'm gonna think a bit more about it as I make that lesson. That lesson will probably be posted next week. I'm gonna think about it more. I'm gonna explore it more, see if I can find some sort of pattern or rule or whatever. But regardless, whether it's a dialect thing or it has to do with whatever, I don't know. What I'm gonna do, the thing I'm gonna recommend to you guys is the safe option. Yeah, well, I talked about longer, longer. They both sound fine. I'd probably do it with a g, but doing without the g sounds fine. Yeah. So my recommendation to you guys is to do the safe thing. The safe thing, which according to Sounds American or whatever that thing was, that channel, was if the ng is in the middle, you're supposed to say the g. I might not necessarily pronounce a word in the middle just because it's in the middle of a word as a g. Like singer definitely sounds better to me than singer. But compared to if you never say the g, like if you say anger instead of anger, which sounds horrible, I think that you're safer always saying the g in the middle, rather than never saying the g in the middle, or trying to figure out when you should and when you shouldn't. So the easy, safe thing to do would be I'll go ahead and say, just for the sake of making it easier and safer for your pronunciation, if you see ng in the middle, go ahead and pronounce the g. If unless you memorize a particular word where you don't have to do it, like I say singer is fine, then you can choose to say it without the g, that's fine. But if you want an easy way, I'm going to recommend say the g in the middle of the word. But of course, in other places, which would just be at the end of a word because it's never at the start of a word. So if it's at the end of a word, even if it connects, okay, well, what happens then if it connects to another word? I mean, do we get the same type of thing? I don't know. I would probably say no, but who knows? But if it's at the end of a word by itself and it doesn't connect to anything, then definitely there's no g. There's not supposed to be a g there. Let's see if we look at connections here. If I say, how do you say? I kind of don't want to say it because then I just give it away. Or do you prefer? Okay, the first syllable rhymes with the word sir. And what is your favorite? Okay. Nice little bonus addition there. Yeah, what's my favorite? Okay, so this word, actually, yeah, I've heard people say it both ways. So I'm gonna say that either way is fine. Um, I naturally pronounce it syrup with the vowel sound. Um, so yes, the first syllable. Well, I wouldn't say rhymes with. It's pronounced exactly the same as SIR, sir. It's just S plus an vowel sound. Um, Apple. Didn't we talk about that? I think we talked about that before, or something similar to that. And I don't know if you're referring. Well, I mean, obviously we're talking about syllables here. I don't know if you're including stress into that because that does affect it. So you rewrite that with caps for like what's stressed or whatever, just to make sure. But yeah, so I say syrup, syrup. I might say syrup, where it's actually more of an R-colored eh sound. Um, to me, in my ears, there's a very clear distinction between ear and ear. Well, not very clear, but in some words, it's very clear. Like syrup. I hear a very clear difference there. A lot of times, it doesn't sound as clear. And I talked about that in the R colored vowel video, right? And we talked about that before. How in general American, it's just ear apparently, or R colored E. I think I don't remember what it's supposed to be there, but so I'll actually use both of those syrup or not syrup. Ugh. See, I'm getting confused because you guys asked me so many questions. I've talked too much about pronunciation. Syrup with an or syrup with an I, R colored I, not an R colored E, syrup. That's not the way I would say it, but it sounds okay because I've heard other people say it that way. What is my favorite syrup? That's a good question. I don't have one. Maple. It would have to be maple. Maple is like maple syrup is like the vegan sweetener, right? I'm vegan, so but maple syrup is expensive, and I don't really eat syrup in general anyway, even before I was vegan. So, yes, I'm an American who doesn't really eat syrup, and also, by the way, I'm an American who doesn't really eat pancakes. I never really liked pancakes. Yeah, no pancakes for me. Anyway, I mean, are both P's pronounced in apple? Oh, good question and horrible question at the same time. Good question because it's a common mistake of perception, and it's something that I'm trying to slowly beat into all of your skulls. Because I have to unteach you or be the first to teach you, if nobody ever taught you before, what is the correct thing. No pancakes. Nope. No pancakes. I'm not a pancake guy. Waffles, maybe. Waffles, maybe. But even then, I'm not too crazy about waffles. Um, so anytime, this should be a 100% rule. If it's not a 100% rule, then it's definitely going to be almost all the time. And so this is what you should always default to. Anytime you see two of the same consonant sound written in the middle of a word, especially if it's a stop consonant sound like P, K, or T, um, it will just be spelling. It is just spelling, just spelling, just spelling. There are not two P's. There are not two P's. I will say that a million times. Apple has one P sound. It's spelled with two P's. And that's a common spelling convention in English. Okay, it is just spelling, but more often than not, um, maybe not more often than not, but if I would say more often than not, but if not, definitely very commonly, a spelling convention in English is if you have a consonant sound in the middle of a word, especially if it is a stop sound, most especially if it's a stop sound. It is the convention is to write it with two of the same letter, but that does not mean there are two of the same sound. Okay, it doesn't affect the pronunciation at all. What affects the pronunciation is the stress, and that'll make it strong or weak or potentially a lot of stop. In most cases, there are certain combinations where it might change certain details, but yes, when you see two P's in apple, is one P. Okay, and the first syllable is stressed, so it's apple, apple, apple. That's it. It's not apple or apple, apple. Two syllables, one P. Um, so yes, good question. um, if I hate or if I hate, see, I saw the word hate. If I seem very adamant or over the top about that point, it's because it's not you. It's how you were taught or the lack of teaching that you received that makes me very energized about that point because it's so annoying to me that you guys either weren't taught that or you were taught wrong before. Um, it's one of my things that get me really annoyed. Anyway, what about apple pie? Nope. Growing up, I was a really, really, really picky eater. A picky eater, for those who don't know. You guys might know, but we have three people here, so whoever the third person is, maybe they don't know this term. A picky eater, or someone who is picky related to eating, is somebody who doesn't like a lot of different types of food, and they really just eat, certain things. When I was younger, I was an extremely picky eater. I ate almost no fruit. Um, and I would probably it would have been better if I was forced to eat fruit because I kind of smelled it or maybe I tasted it once and I was like, I don't like that. Because yeah, anyway. But I didn't really like any fruit. So I ate almost no fruit as a kid. Vegetables, of course, what kid likes vegetables? Although I have a way to fix that. But that's a completely different topic. um, so I had vegetables, but I was really a big meat eater. Like I always liked the taste of meat. That was my main thing. And then potatoes also. Like I always love potatoes. Meat and potatoes. I'm Irish, definitely Irish. Um, so if it wasn't meat and it wasn't potatoes, then for the most part, um, I didn't particularly care for. I mean, I ate cereal and stuff. I had some other stuff and whatever ice cream, but I was really picky. I didn't like mustard. I didn't like I like ketchup. That was like the one thing I would put on things: ketchup. No mustard, no mayonnaise, no anything is blah. Okay. Um, these days, especially after I became vegan, that really got me to stop being less picky. um, because it's like, okay, I went from eating no fruit, very little vegetables, to being vegan. It's like if you don't eat vegetables, maybe fruit you can sort of get away with, although you should eat fruit anyway. But if you don't eat vegetables as a vegan, you're probably gonna die. I mean, you got beans and stuff, you got nuts and seeds, but I mean, vegetables are like at least half the food. Even if you eat meat, that's half the food you should be eating anyway. Vegetables are so great for you. So I had to sort of expand. But pies are one of the things as a kid that I never liked. I don't know why. I just didn't like pies. I know they're sweet and they're tasty and everybody likes them. I don't like them. I don't like them. I'm not big on cake like things. I know a pie is not a cake. I like ice cream, but I didn't like cake. I was never big on cake either. Yes, I did not like cake. I'm just not American, apparently. um, but I didn't really like pies. At some point, probably when I was about 12 or 13, I tried pecan pie, also pronounced pecan pie, because that word can be pronounced multiple ways, but pecan, I like pecan pie. And that is a good pie. That's absolutely amazingly delicious. I love pecan pie. Apple pie, these days I can eat it, but I still really don't like it. I'm not big on apples, even just regular apples. I just don't like apples. I don't know why. I just don't like them. Um, so no, I don't like apple pie. Um, and Seaton also hates pancakes. Yeah. Do Indians eat pancakes? Is that like a common thing? Like I don't know, because I mean, I know obviously you have your own food and stuff. Some of which I have had and is absolutely delicious. But I don't know, in India, what kind of Western foods. I'm sure you have McDonald's. Everybody has McDonald's, but I don't know, you know, what is normal Western food in India. You know, um, that'd be interesting to know. This is crazy. No pancakes, cakes, pies, and you haven't seen American classes lately. Exactly. Okay, pizza. Yes, pizza is something I like. Now these days, because I'm vegan, I don't tend to eat pizza unless I buy the, really expensive $8 vegan pizza that has vegan cheese and possibly vegan meat on it. And those are actually really good. Some people don't like them, but I think they're really good. Um, if we're talking about my experience of pizza in general, um, not including any vegan considerations, are you asking now? I can give you a brand because I definitely have a favorite brand, which you may have never heard of, which is Papa John's. That is by far the best pizza I've ever tasted ever. The crust is amazing. Just pizza is it's awesome. In terms of like toppings, like what I would want to put on my pizza, cheese, of course, sauce could be tomato sauce, whatever. That's fine, or pesto sauce. Pesto sauce is fine too. Cheese, just regular cheese, mozzarella blend. It doesn't matter. Um, my brain stopped. I don't think about pizza anymore because I don't really eat it that much. Um, some form of meat, of course, not vegan meat, but I guess we'll just say sausage. I always like sausage. Not too big on pepperoni. I've never liked that anyway. I used to like to put chicken on pizza. That was so good. Chicken on pizza. That was amazing. Um, mushrooms, olives. Yes, mushrooms on pizza. I know some people hate that idea. Mushrooms, olives, banana peppers. Got to put banana peppers on pizza. Got to put banana peppers on pizza. Probably too much like Trump. Got to put bananas and peppers on pizza, folks. Yeah. Anyway, that is something that he would probably say too. I like putting garlic um, on my pizza, but I like putting garlic on pretty much everything. Like there was one time, the one cake that I really like is carrot cake, but not with cream cheese frosting because I hate cream cheese. Um, I take the well, you can make this vegan now. My grandma actually made carrot cake cupcakes that were vegan with this frosting that I like to put on it. So it's carrot cake, but then the frosting is I always forget what it's called. It's like coconut pecan or something. It's the frosting that usually goes on German chocolate cake in at least in America. I don't know, you if you would know what that refers to in a different country, but it's like it's this brownish, creamy frosting. I mean, that it sounds like anything. But anyway, you get the point. You put that on carrot cake. It's super sweet, but it's so good. That's like the one cake that I really really love. Um, there was a reason I mentioned that. I can't think. It's probably because I'm drinking soda. Can't think when I drink soda. I need to stop drinking soda. I don't drink soda very much. But this literally, not in cans. I used to get we can here in the United States we have gigantic refill cups. You can go to 7-Eleven and just refill them for like $1. Um, but this drink, Dr. Pepper, is this is so bad. This is almost all I used to drink for like 5 or 6 years, from like the second half of high school into like halfway through college. Like this is all I drank. Like I would not drink water, I would not drink milk, I would not drink juice. I mean, I would have it here and there. I might have a Monster Energy drink or something, but this is almost exclusively what I drank for like 5 years. It's so bad for your health. And luckily I don't have diabetes or something. I probably did damage that I'll see later, but I notice now that I don't drink it so much. Whenever I drink it, I kind of can't think as clearly, which sucks. But okay, what are pizzas in the U.S. named like? Here in Europe, they often use the Italian names. Oh yeah, we definitely don't do that. Not at all. Like that's not even a thing I've ever heard of. The only thing off the top of my head, I think probably the only thing that we refer to with like the Italian names for like the different types of things would be Starbucks. Because they have like venti and whatever. I don't even know. Venti grande. Yeah. I think those are supposed to be Italian. I don't even know, but that's because it's Starbucks. Like just their convention. Like I mean, we'll use Italian names for things, but that's like for the thing. Like you know, pizza, spaghetti. Like I'm assuming those are the same. Lasagna, linguine. You know, whatever. So, but what are pizzas in the U.S. named, or like how we would say how are they named? Um, Small, medium, large. Like I don't know if you're just talking about the size or if there's like a different type of arrangement. um, or if that deals with like any of the toppings or something. I don't know, but my mind goes towards size, which would be small, medium, large, extra large. And then some places like Giant Pizza King offer king size or giant size, which are like this big. They're huge. God, I miss pizza. Oh, I'm so hungry now. Oh, this is all your fault. Why you gotta do this to me? I meant the type of arrangement. Oh, okay. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I don't think we have a whole lot special. I mean, we have so different places. I mean, they'll have special arrangements that they call like this. We have some standard ones, like yeah, like there's like cheese pizza or extra cheese pizza. Like that'd probably just be cheese or with like extra cheese, not anything else, and that's fine. That's a standard thing. You know, Americans really like to put toppings on, especially meat toppings. So meat lovers is the standard thing, which is like all the different. There's like 5 or 6 different kinds of meats that they offer, and they'll just put all of them on the pizza with like no vegetables. Um, we have Supreme, which is it's like an everything. Um, so there'll be like I think it's like sausage and pepperoni, so like 2 types of meat and then a bunch of vegetables. So there's like onions, bell pepper, um, maybe mushrooms, olives, and that might be it. That's like the standard Supreme. When I was growing up as a kid, I never liked Supreme because I didn't like the vegetables. I didn't like the onions and the bell peppers. Bleh. I didn't even like mushrooms at the time. Now I'll eat a Supreme if it's vegan. That's fine. But also have meat lover Supreme, cheese. Um, Probably have another one that's pretty standard. We also have a thing called stuffed crust. I don't know if you have that or if that's an American thing, but that's where they put cheese into the crust. So there's cheese on the pizza and cheese in the crust at the end of the pizza. That's really good. What else do we have?